My name is Ann Price. I'm president of Community Evaluation Solutions. I have been in business since, oh my gosh, 2004, which means I think I started when I was 2018. No, just kidding. But we do nonprofit coalition work and we also work with foundations. And Matt kind of roped me into this group. I think we had this idea at the same time. I'm not quite sure why. We still have folks joining, actually, so I'm gonna let them in, Matt. But anyway, I also have office hours twice a month. If you would like to join, just ping me and I will send you the registration. And we dig into your questions about consulting and really spend a lot of time talking about your business. And this is one of the topics that I presented to, I hope they don't mind, I called them my younglings a couple of months ago. So apologies to them who are on the call because they're going to hear this talk again. But today we're going to be talking about scope creep. So let's start with the definition of scope. We should start there. So it's the extent of what the project will produce, which is the product scope. What is that thing that you are building, and the work that you need to do to produce it, which is the project scope. So both of those things together are what I am talking about when I'm talking about scope. So what is scope creep? Now, I live in Georgia. I've been here since 1984, but I grew up in Florida. So I've spent my entire life living in the South. And for those of you who are from the South or have ever driven in the South, you may have noticed this vine along the interstate. It looks like it's taking over all of the trees, all of the bushes, everything. And that's because it actually is. It's called kudzu. Somebody brought this plant in from Japan, I believe, and it has like taken over the South, I swear. Well, that's the image that I want you to have in mind when it comes to scope creep. So it's adding any additional deliverables or features or trainings, anything that is added to the work once you've signed that contract. So what's the big deal? Because, you know, Matt had mentioned, somebody else had mentioned, but I like to help and I'd like to make my clients happy. So what's the big deal if they ask you to do something that is not in your contract? And I am just as guilty as anybody about saying yes to things that I probably should not say yes to. Well, first of all, it really impacts the work that's already in your contract. And how does it do that? Well, it affects your timeline, of course, because, you know, you can't just like squeeze the toothpaste back into, you know, the toothpaste container. It's going to bump out things, right? If you think about dropping, you know, color into water, it's going to spread all over. So it's going to affect your timeline. It's going to affect your budget, and it's going to leave you with less time to do the work that you actually agreed on. So what are the consequences? The work is not going to get completed, perhaps. Maybe you rush, the product is not as good, and you're definitely going to run into cost overruns. So if you run your you know, your profit and loss, your estimated versus your actual for that project, you're probably going to be in the hole. And before I go on, let me just say that because we're independent consultants, I'm assuming that you're probably like me and you have multiple clients. Maybe you have just that one big, huge client and that's all you need, or one or two big projects, but you probably have multiple contracts. So it doesn't just affect that contract, it affects all of your contracts. It also affects your mental health, your ease, your anxiety, all of those kinds of things that are impacting us right now. So let's talk about how you manage scope creep. So first of all, let's start with your contract. This is something that we've talked about in this group quite a bit. And so please go back to the YouTube channel and take a listen to some of the other sessions that people have had. But first of all, you want to clearly define your deliverables. Now, somebody asked about, well, should I limit the number of questions that I have in my survey, or the number of questions that I have in my focus group or my key informant interview? That I would not get that granular. My contracts usually have, it's more like, we deliver X number of focus groups or X number of key informant interviews, and that time is built in. But we do define, hopefully clearly, sometimes not as clearly as I think I'm being, but to talk about what our deliverables are so that it's very clear. Then you want to have a kickoff meeting with your client and all the stakeholders that you can gather, so that everybody has a clear understanding of what is in your contract. And this may help. I think it was Jen that talked about feeling like she was being treated like an employee. So, hey, now fix our IT problem, or can you, I don't know, help us with the Outlook issue we're having, whatever it is they're asking you to do that is not in the scope. If you do that on the front end, hey guys, let's just review our contract and our due dates and see if we have any questions, any things need to get clarified, will be really, really helpful, because sometimes you'll run into a situation like I did recently where the group had never really worked with a consultant before. And I'll try to come back to that story in a minute. So yeah, kickoff meeting will be really helpful. And then understand report expectations. And you might be asking yourself, well, what the heck does that have to do with scope creep? Well, I have been on a team with a colleague, and I was not the lead, she was the lead, but we went into a lot of cost overruns over the report. I'm still to this day not quite sure what they were expecting, but I try to, on the front end, have a conversation about reporting. Are you expecting a traditional report? If so, about how long? What do you think about a PowerPoint report? What do you think about a slide deck as a report? Do you want the 1-3-30 model? Just try to get some kind of understanding about reporting. I often send them outlines and maybe even a little sample of what I'm thinking about, just to control that back and forth that sometimes happens if you're not real clear about reporting expectations. And then, you know, who's in charge, who's on first. It's really important to understand who you are answerable to. Ultimately, who is the person, you know, kind of, you know, who is signing your checks, rather. That's really important. Otherwise, you may get dragged around by this person or that person on staff, and that can definitely impact your scope creep. Now, you want to provide a status reports. You might negotiate that up front. I usually like to ask folks, if I can't get a sense, how do you like to be communicated with? Would you prefer a weekly status report email? Do you want a quarterly status report? We're doing that with one of our large contracts that I have with Positive Impact Consultants, which is my DBA, my doing business as. So we provide quarterly status reports, but I've had clients that really want weekly status report. It really depends on the types and the amounts of products that you have. So think about that. I always do monthly calls, even for my little baby clients. We just have a chat anywhere from 20 minutes to maybe 30 minutes, maybe an hour, just to talk about the project, how it's going. It's a really great time to say, hey, I see next up on our deliverable list, we really need to be designing that focus group protocol, because we're going to be doing those focus groups, you know, in July, whatever it is. I'm always referring back to that contract so that it's front and center and top of mind. When all else fails, CYA, I try to find a really nice picture of a cow's butt here, but you get the picture. You know what CYA means. So contract language, that's where you cover your tail end. And I put in language that goes something like this: expansion of the scope or extent of this contract beyond the effort outlined in this scope of work may be made only through mutual agreement by both parties, you know, community evaluation solutions and insert client's name as evidenced in writing. So you want to have that language in your contract. And you want to specify the amount that you're going to charge. So how much are you going to bill for work that is over and above what was what was asked for that was not in the contract? And you want to talk about a change orders. Now, I always tell people that I never went to business school. What I've learned has just been, as my business coach says, wow, you have really like good business intuition, right? So somewhere along the line, I went, if they ask for something outside the contract, I think we need, a change order, right? So it just specifies you have asked that we do what? Provide a training for your staff to attend a workshop with you, to change data collection, anything that triggers a change order. So before I head on to this question, and I think I saw the chat pop up, so we'll check that in just a minute. In your contract, you want to talk about what triggers that change order. That would be really important. So this gets to Matt's point and somebody else's point earlier as you guys were introducing yourself, and somebody, I think they used the word self-inflicted wounds, or maybe I just wrote that down because we're probably, somebody did, like suggesting things for the client. That's great, but that might be better for a conversation about once the engagement is done, the other things that you're suggesting they do. But when do you do something for the sake of the relationship? And I would say it depends. Somebody said something about like being asked to write a grant. I don't write grants. We're too busy with evaluation work and coalition work that I just don't have that capacity. That's definitely something I would pass on to a colleague. Occasionally, I'll be asked to review a reapplication or review a grant evaluation section, or maybe even write that little section. And I will do that. And sometimes I don't charge for that. If it's a long-term relationship, if it's a relationship that I've had for a while, I'm pretty sure we're going to keep going. And I really like them, right? I want to keep that relationship. So I think everybody has to kind of decide for themselves when you do that and what kind of things they're asking for. So a nod to Matt and his 5.5 tips. I have totally stolen that. So my 5.5 tips are: specify your scope of work, be really detailed, include language about what triggers that change order, communicate right away if you see that there's going to be a problem or they're asking something outside the scope. And I would say over communicate when all else fails. And then, just like I tell people about logic models, there's nothing magical about a logic model. There's nothing magical about a change order if you don't stick to your guns and implement your change order. Review your deliverables at the start of your contract as well as ongoing, so that you are staying on top of everything. And it's also a good check-in to make sure your client is super happy with what you've got to say. And then, there's my 5.5 to over communicate. So before I stop sharing, I want to tell you just briefly about my 2 experiences with scope creep recently, both with the same kind of client. So one, it was just what we were talking about. They were applying for a grant. They needed data, and they didn't just need like 1 or 2 data points. That would have been I'll just give it to you, no big deal. It was not like that. It was a list of data, an arm long, and they caught me. And I didn't see the list. They just kind of caught me in the car, and I'm like, I don't, possibly let me take a look at our contract. Let me take a look at our hours, and let me see what we can do and our schedule. And when I looked at it, I'm like, no, this is not going to happen. That happened like on a Wednesday or a Thursday. By Monday, they canceled our contract, which I did not cry about. Recently, in a similar type of contract, same funder actually, they asked us to attend a training session with one of their staff members. And I've been trained. I have no interest in going through the training again, but somebody on the team who's going to be responsible has not been on the contract. And so we both said, hey, Holly, we would love to help. This would be great for our new contractor here. But that's really not in the scope of our work. Would you like me to cost that out for you? And they said yes. And I gave them a price, and they emailed this morning and said they were great with that. So sometimes it works out and sometimes it doesn't, if you stick to your guns. So I'm really looking forward to this conversation, and I'm going to stop the share now.